Hawaii on a Monday. It's our first show of the week, and it's very significant in that regard. This is used to be Marco and me, but today it's Mina, Marco, and me, because Mina Morita, former chair of the PUC, joins Marco Mangelsdorf, and me, Marco Mangelsdorf from Provision Solar. Welcome to the show, Mina, Marco.
Hi, thanks for having me again.
Greetings to both Jay and Mina, two of my favorite people to spend an hour talking about energy with on a Monday. How could a Monday be better than that? Thank you very much.
We're going to call this the week after, because it's the week after the Asia Pacific Clean Energy Summit conference thing at the convention center last week. And we're talking to both of these guys from opposite ends of the state. Mina joins us by Skype audio from Kauai, and Marco joins us by Skype audio from Hilo. So we got the whole state covered. We enveloped the whole state in this discussion. So why don't we talk about oil first, because oil sort of is a driver, like it or not. We sort of built into our whole energy DNA the fact that oil has been going up, but it hasn't been going up. And how much has it not been going up, Marco, and how does that affect things?
Well, one of the things I do in my spare time, Jay, is I go to the BP website, BP, what used to be known as British Petroleum, and they put together an annual stats guide, statistical annual on energy supplies, energy production, energy consumption on a global basis, and it's really kind of the Bible for those of us who are deep into the energy field on a global basis. And I was struck by a couple of graphs that I wanted to share with you. And if Ian can put up the first graph, which will show what oil pricing has done since the 1800s, it's really quite interesting to see as far as how it's gone up and down and kind of all around, especially most proximately in the past 10, 15 years. So maybe Ian could put that up.
Okay, you guys in the control room, what do you say? How about the chart of oil? Okay, we're going to get that. You'll see. There it is. Okay, we have the chart of oil, and it started high, and it went way low, and then it started to get high, and then it went low, and now it's high, I guess. Is this the chart you're talking about?
Yeah, I'm not seeing it yet. Oh, there we go. Okay, bit of a delay. Yeah, what I find really striking, Jay, is that with oil parked these days in the $40 to $50 a barrel range, you have to go back essentially about 15 years to see when oil was that cheap last. And it's just so striking to me that no one a couple years ago was predicting, at least as far as I know, predicting that oil would drop below where it had been parked for the past prior years, for several years, which is about $100 a barrel, that it would go down to not only below 50, but even as low as high 30s. So it's really indicative of just how volatile the oil market can be in terms of pricing historically, just over the past 30 to 40 years. And again, I'm still struck by the fact that it is been parked at around $40 a barrel now for months and months, and with the likelihood of more Iranian oil coming on the market and the likelihood of both fracking continuing relatively robustly on the U.S. mainland, and the likelihood of one of the largest oil suppliers in the world that has by far the largest amount of reserves, Saudi Arabia, that they will continue their output, indicates to me that there's going to be a continuing surplus on the global market. In other words, more oil produced and getting to the market than actually consumed, which means typically that pricing will remain low compared to high. So,
well, let me just add one thing. Egypt. Did you hear about Egypt? Off Egypt, they found one of the largest, if not the largest, natural gas deposits offshore, I think. And that's going to change energy. It's going to change natural gas anyway. So we're going to see what that does to all of this. And I mean, certainly it's going to have the effect of making oil cheaper.
Yeah, and a couple of other slides that don't display well, so I'll just talk about them rather than showing them. That struck me is the fact that over the past 5 years, U.S. oil production has gone up more than 50%, about 55%, which, again, very few people were predicting 10 years ago when there was all this talk of so-called peak oil, both for U.S. production and global production, and lo and behold, due to the wonders of hydraulic fracturing or fracking, U.S. oil production in a short 5 years has gone up more than 50%, which very few people predicted years ago, which has led to, certainly contributed to this overall surplus of oil on the world market. Another thing that was striking is that the amount of oil reserves in the U.S. mainland, and less so, I think, in Alaska, but mostly in the U.S. mainland, the oil reserves have been deemed to have gone up by over 60% over the past 10 years. So it's still far, far below in terms of what the U.S. holds compared to Middle Eastern countries, especially the Saudis. But through greater, more sophisticated techniques of finding oil where it wasn't findable or available earlier in decades gone by, both the U.S. production has gone up significantly and perceived reserves have gone up significantly. And the same can be said, although not quite as high a percentage, for U.S. natural gas, which is also just striking how both the nat gas and the oil markets have really been upended over these past several years with new players coming on the market and a relative surplus.
I have two questions for you, Marco. Mina, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
Maybe you can help on some of my two questions. One is, what's more important to Hawaii? In a completely long plan view of it, is it oil or is it liquid natural gas? In terms of the fact that these things now, it seems like they're going down in price, and people ultimately are going to want cheap energy. That's what the squawk is about, seems like to me these days. And so if we have, for example, oil at $35 or less, and we have an existing infrastructure that burns oil for isn't that going to yield cheaper energy? I know it hasn't yet, but isn't it ultimately going to yield cheaper energy for us? And aren't people going to want that? And is that more important than LNG going forward?
I think going forward, it's not only the cost factor that will be important, but how clean that fuel source is and the efficiency of that fuel source. So, and also our ability to procure competitive pricing for that source.
Yeah, true. The market is changing. The oil and natural gas market is changing. But let me ask you, Marco, this: isn't there a direct relationship between, say, the cost of oil, for that matter, the cost of natural gas, and global economic activity? In other words, the stock market crash in China, which we're not out of the woods on that yet, for sure. The stock market crash in China and whatever other economic slowdowns we have in the world, isn't that going to reduce the cost of a barrel of oil because there's less demand for it in an economy which doesn't need it so much as before? And is it a leading indicator or is it a lagging indicator? In other words, how does the global economy play with the cost of a barrel of oil?
Well, that's a great question, and not being an economist by training per se, or even an oil specialist per se, it's my understanding that energy needs to be not too cheap, not too expensive, but just kind of in a Goldilocks, just right band. So when it hits, when was it back in the fall of 2008 when it was trading at close to $150 a barrel, That certainly wasn't good for the world's economy. But how beneficial is it that oil is parked at $40 a barrel right now? Well, depends on one's perspective, of course, because if you're Mr. Maduro, president of Venezuela, or you're Mr. Vladimir Putin in Russia, you're not terribly happy because your main source of export earnings is a single commodity. So I think it depends on one's perspective, and I can't claim to know really kind of what that sweet range is between high and low as far as encouraging the maximum amount of quantitative growth in the economy.
Say one thing, if we are able to reach our 100% renewables by 2045, that certainly, to me, would suggest, and at a reasonable price, that would suggest to me that our economy in the state of Hawaii will be better, simply because we're not sending so much money offshore, because we're spending it here, and it'll turn through the economy here, and that'll help. But that's sorry.
Jay, I think, you're right. What we're trying to do is insulate ourselves from global forces and, sort of make us less vulnerable to the swings of factors that we can't control. So that's a great part of it. Part of it is protecting us from that pricing volatility.
Yeah. The thing is that Hawaii is alone in its devotion, I think, its total commitment, or very nearly total commitment to renewable energy. A lot of places in the world, they're not quite committed like that. And they're going to remain susceptible to these shifts in the prices of fossil fuel. So A, it gives us an advantage if we have the stability of renewables, local renewables. But B, it seems to me that we're not out of the woods on volatility here. That as the global economy changes going forward, the price of oil and the price of gas will change also. And just because it's in the 30s now, doesn't mean it's not going to go way high, over the next few decades. Don't you agree?
Well, in fact, that's a great question I wanted to pose to Mina, which is, if, let's say, hypothetically, the price of oil sticks at more or less where it is now for the foreseeable future, let's say the next 6, 24, 36 plus months, do you still feel just as strongly that the governor's announced decision about putting a stop to the LNG train, that is still a rather unwise thing to do?
There is a threshold where LNG may become less attractive. But I think when you factor in environmental compliance, I think when you factor in efficiency, I think when you factor in that we're not only looking at electricity, but we're also looking at ground and marine transportation fuels, it's still I believe, a more compelling case. Because I believe the governor's position on just focusing on renewables, he's just focusing in on electricity generation. He's not focusing in on what the state should be doing, is that whole larger energy infrastructure. Electricity is just the low-hanging fruit, but we have a bigger piece of the pie that we need to address too.
Mm-hmm. I don't recall exactly, Mina, but when you spoke on this issue last week after David Ige's surprise statement about LNG, there are a lot of people who expressed concern in the editorials and in the letters to the editor in the Star Advertiser. And part of that was over process, not necessarily over the substantive aspects, of his decision, but over process. That is, did he do his homework? Did he consult with his agencies? And of course, the other side of that process is, did he pull the rug out from under the PUC, who's supposed to make this kind of decision. I guess he was saying that, that he's going to create a new kind of leadership and all that, but in ignoring the, conventional methodology for making these decisions, he may have set a precedent that'll get us in trouble later on. I don't know if that's part of your reasoning. I'd be interested in your thoughts about it, though.
Yeah, I think that's what concerns me, because there's been a lot of preliminary work done on LNG by both private and public agencies to see if this was a reasonable approach. So, I don't know of any analysis that sort of embraces this position, and that's why I believe he needs to be a little bit more transparent on how he comes to his conclusion. Because again, they're just contradictory to everything that I know that's publicly available and what's been discussed internally between different agencies.
Marco, you with us?
Yeah, and that's something that I hadn't really given much thought at all until Mina brought it up, is that LNG goes beyond, and that gas goes beyond power generation. That, as I've been telling my students for the past years, and we've spoken about as well, Jay, that the transportation that has really been the more difficult, most challenging, most almost insurmountable to date nut to crack in terms of reducing our dependence on imported fossil fuels to fuel both our ground transportation and on our inter-island transportation. So if LNG can play a role in, number one, reducing costs, number two, make it cleaner for people to get from point A to point B, then that makes the governor's announcement even more, I guess, a bit puzzling.
I at the APCES, after the panel that you guys were on, I went and did some interviews. And one of the guys that I interviewed, I don't know if you've met this man, his name is Mark Hoffman, with a company he founded called Innovus. And Innovus's job is to integrate all sources on a grid that takes it from everyone. And it's based on the notion that it's a lot easier to be able to take the energy from, wherever it's coming, and sort of work forward to the future that way, instead of focusing only on renewables, because if you focus only on renewables, you're losing the benefit of what you put into the the conventional generating systems and so forth, and it's just a shock to the system, and it may not be as practical as a system which integrates all sources. And I must say that I was impressed with that in terms of the practicality of it. Because if we draw hard lines on this and say, okay, you're going to give up all fossil fuel right now, and not take advantage of it for anything, including transportation, you may be disrupting our society. And I think that's what I hear you saying.
Yeah, one of the tenets that we, kind of put forth constantly is you have to have a portfolio of resources and a portfolio of technology. So you know what your goals are, you know what your objectives are, but you're agnostic to resource and technology, and what you want are the cleanest, most affordable, commercially viable resource and technology around to keep moving you forward. Granted, there was a time when renewables was not cost competitive, and I believe for the right reasons, we set a floor. But again, we shouldn't move away from that tenet of having a variety of resources, like a stock portfolio. A variety of resources and technologies.
Yeah. We're going to take a break now, but before we do, I just want to tell you we got a tweet where this fellow asks, how do you shift a societal culture of now to think and act on what is good for the long term. And how do you maintain optimism when you haven't solved that? Interesting question. Maybe we can talk about it after the break. We are talking about societal change. And in that connection, we're going to take a 1-minute societal change here on Mina, Marco, and me the week after, and we'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Donna Blanchard. I'm the host of Center Stage here on ThinkTech Hawaii. Center Stage airs every Wednesday at 2 o'clock, and of course you can check out our archives on YouTube or on ThinkTech Hawaii anytime you like. Why should you do that? Because this is an arts show that I believe is making a difference in lives. We talk with artists of various ilk. We talk with painters and writers, playwrights, novelists, poets, sculptors, dancers, you name it, directors, actors, of course. And we don't only talk about what people do, but we talk about how they do it. And my favorite part of the conversation, we talk about why they do it. And it's really common on this show to hear people say, wow, I didn't think about it that way. And it's very common to hear people afterwards who have seen the show say the same thing. And I hear all the time that people are inspired by the conversations that we have. So why don't you join us and be inspired too? That's Center Stage on Wednesdays at 2 o'clock. We'll see you Center Stage.
Okay, we're
but you're
back
in an
live.
air-conditioned
We're here with
facility.
Mina,
I'm just
Morita,
welcoming
and
you.
Marco Mangelsdorf. They both are joining us by Skype audio from their respective islands, Mina from Kauai and Marco from the Big Island. And so we're kind of discussing the issues that have come up in the week after APCES at the Convention Center last week. And Marco, you had something that you wanted to say regarding Mina's thought as she has expressed it.
Yes, and I think it's a really juicy question to ask whether we can have the cleanest, cheapest, and commercially viable sources of energy. In other words, can a source of energy meet all those criteria of being the cheapest, of being the cleanest, of being commercially viable, or are trade-offs necessary that what will be cleanest and what will move us faster towards greater energy independence is not, for now and for the near term, not going to be the cheapest, even though it may be commercially viable. In other words, is it possible to have it all? And I think it's a complicated answer to that question, and you get involved in subsidies and tax credits and FIT programs and net energy metering, and it's fundamentally it's not a black and white answer. I mean, renewables are still, comparatively speaking, are more expensive unless you want to start going down the road of so-called levelized cost of energy based on the projections of what the energy is going to be produced given the investment made over the life of the project, and that's a little bit more out there. So it's just really challenging in terms of what direction do we go in.
That's the hot spot that Mina was sitting on for a good part of her time at the PUC, I think, where people, at the top of their voice would say, I not only want it clean, I want it cheap. Give me both. And what do you say? What do you say to that, Mina?
Well, I think that's one of the key reasons why you beef up the PUC staff and you beef up the consumer advocate staff, because you get policy guidance from the legislature, and then you're doing the technical and economic analysis to get you as close to your objectives as possible. So, the roles that those two agencies play are critical, and especially at a time when we shouldn't be making political decisions, we have to have sound analysis moving forward, because, you're talking very expensive infrastructure going forward.
Absolutely. Let's take a moment and talk about NextEra. It's interesting that NextEra is still a player, still in maybe it's always been in the background, always having a kind of quiet effect on all these decisions. and you don't know actually what kind of influence that it has over the decisions by Hawaiian Electric, although it's my understanding that in a merger like this, it can't dictate what Hawaiian Electric does in the merger period, in the period of approval. That's something it cannot do. But it still has an effect somehow. And here we are in an approval process that's taking twists and turns that really nobody anticipated. I'm not sure that anybody anticipated all the pushback. I'm not sure that anybody anticipated that David Ige would come out against it that way. And I guess from the papers that are being filed on the PUC right now, it sounds like it's still in full tilt boogie. There's an argument happening, and nobody's backing down. Am I right?
Well, I can say something on that subject because I just received earlier this morning, essentially the info on what the applicants, NextEra and Hawaii Electric Industries are submitting today to the PUC as essentially rebuttal testimony to the 28 interveners and the consumer advocate. And my first read of this really quickly is they've come up with more than 400 pages worth of testimony, and it's a strong pushback to their critics and those who are challenging the wisdom and benefit of this deal. So they are, they're still all in as far as trying to make the case that what they're proposing would be not just marginally good for the residents of the state, but would be tangibly, demonstrably beneficial. Now that's the argument that they're making, because which is what I would expect them to make. And what's going to be very interesting to see is in the days and weeks to come whether the key players in this game are going to be brought over to the side of the applicants, and because from the governor on down to various state agencies, Consumer Advocate, DBED, OSP, Office of State Planning, the pushback and the negative view on the proposed merger has been very clear. So to what extent this effort at rebuttal is going to be successful, obviously it's too early to tell because it's just happening today as we speak. But I think that's going to be really critical in the days, weeks, the next month or two, as far as will they be able to stem the tide? Will they be able to start turning people in their direction?
Well, they haven't given up, that's for sure. And it's interesting how, as this thing goes down the track, there are so many sub-issues and parallel concerns that are involved in the approval or disapproval of their application. I mean, for example, the environmentalists don't like what they have in mind, I guess, or what they think they have in mind for LNG. And the people who want a down-home, local utility company, don't want any foreign big national utility companies, taking the field here, are willing to, forgive all the anger they apparently had with Hawaiian Electric and now go back to the local company, another issue. And then there's the issue of, how they are responding to requests for information, how they are responding to the consumer advocate. I mean, so many different constituencies with so many different views. I just don't know how it all can get together. I mean, if on the one hand it's approved, there'll be 1 million people who are unhappy. On the other hand, if it's disapproved, there'll be 1 million people, well, maybe not quite 1 million. There'll be still a lot of people who are unhappy. Mina, how is it going? Is this something, that you would have anticipated?
Did I anticipate all this pushback? Was that the question?
Well, the pushback and the fact that, the game is still going on, and that there's so many issues, and that when you have so many issues, you're really not sure of the result.
Well, I think, there are a lot of distracting issues going forward. you have this the Alliance for Solar Choice taking a real active public role and putting up a lot of distracting issues to kind of maintain their market. So, again, that both, I think the interveners, the CA and the PUC are just working through this. I can't figure out if we're at the end of the first half or at the end of the third quarter. I'm still trying to figure it. But I think the key is how did they respond to the conditions?
Yeah. Oh, the conditions, right. Many conditions.
Yeah.
Can you just give the flavor of the conditions? What kind of conditions is the consumer advocate asking for?
Well, a lot of it has to do with the governance issues and local governance issues.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, actually the biggest area of concern is how much of a benefit will this be to the ratepayer, and can they justify their numbers?
Yeah, and I suppose a cousin to that issue is this notion, and I think they've said a lot to support it, that they're going to put in billions of dollars to improve the infrastructure, and the implication is that we would have trouble doing that with the existing arrangement. That there is just not that much money that can be put in for the infrastructure, but a company like NextEra does have the money, can raise the money, can find the money, and if it wants to, it can remake our grid. And I think remaking our grid is a question of money, so that's a pretty important issue.
Yeah, I mean, especially last week when Moody's issued a negative watch on HEI. I think that's why the governor's comments are so I can't find the right word, disturbing, knowing what this might do to HEI's credit rating.
Yeah, I mean, if in the worst case analysis, the deal falls apart, Hawaiian Electric is unable to find another suitor, Hawaiian Electric has trouble going forward, and if it has trouble financially going forward, for whatever reason, then that is going to affect reliability. And then
right, and
we'll
the thing is, those costs get passed on to the ratepayer. The higher financing costs.
Yeah.
That gets passed on to the ratepayer.
Yeah. So we're at a crossroads here. I mean, this deal, like it or not, is the crossroads for us, and depending on approval or disapproval, we will follow different paths, and some of them may not be what we want when we think about it. Marco, your thoughts?
It is so kind of mind-boggling to keep on track of, as far as the number of stakeholders at the table, what's at stake in deciding some really monumental questions as far as the direction the state is going to go in regarding energy, and it's kind of difficult to swallow in one bite. And just when you think, speaking for myself, just when I think I've kind of got a pretty good handle on it, then the next day or the next week rolls around and there's something else that comes up almost out of nowhere. I mean, very few people that I know were expecting the governor to make the announcement he did, that kind of upended things in a big way last week, and it still has reverberation, so to speak, in the fact that he took to speaking to Katie Mickleseth at the Star Advertiser in a feature piece in the Advertiser yesterday. Shows me that not only is he not backing down on what he said, but he's doubling down on what he said.
Yeah.
So,
we're gonna double down for just one moment, and you know what that means. We're gonna take a short break. Mina, Morita, and Marco Mangelsdorf. The week after, here on Mina, Marco, and me. We'll be right back.
Mahalo for watching ThinkTech Hawaii. We are a channel dedicated to raising public awareness about the importance of technology, energy, diversification, and globalism to the future of Hawaii. We broadcast and stream daily from 1 to 5 every weekday, and we broadcast on Olelo 54 and OC16 TV. All of our shows are archived on thinktechhawaii.com, and we hope to see you there. Aloha.
Hi, I'm Ethan Allen. I'm the host of Likeable Science on ThinkTech Hawaii. We talk about why people should like science, why science is actually fun, how science is a dynamic and vital part of everyone's life, why everyone, every man, woman, and child on the planet should really know science, should love science, should be familiar with science. So it's a great show. People come on here and have interesting conversations with us. They tell us why they do what they do, why they love it, why we should love it too. I hope you'll join us every Friday, 1 to 2 p.m. And of course, you can see it anytime on YouTube. Aloha.
Okay, we're back. We're live. I'm Jay Fidell here on Mina, Marco, and me. Our bi-weekly show at 12 noon on every other Monday. And Mina Morita, former chair of the PUC, joins us by Skype audio from Kauai, and Marco Mangelsdorf, as he has so many times in the past, joins us by Skype audio from Hilo. He's the CEO of ProVision Solar. We're talking about the week after the APCES, the Asia Pacific Clean Energy Summit, and we're talking about exactly what's going on with the NextEra process in the PUC. And the last we knew, I mean, the largest thing anyway, was a motion by the consumer advocate for not only an evidentiary hearing, but for subpoenas addressed to Connie Lau, who is the CEO of HEI, the holding company on HECO, and Eric Gleason, the CEO of...
Jim Robo.
Jim Robo, who's the CEO of NextEra, I mean, the parent corporation in Florida. Now, that's quite something. This is a major effort to have an evidentiary hearing of major national magnitude, I would say. So, how do you guys react to that? And Marco, you mentioned that there's been some pushback on that from NextEra. So, what's happening?
Well, late last week, NextEra formally responded to the consumer advocates' request of the PUC to put Jim Robo and Connie Lau on the stand, so to speak, and not surprisingly, the response from NextEra and HEI was we were not inclined to do this because there's already plenty of evidence in the discovery period so far, and that 40,000 some odd pages. And if the consumer advocate wants more information, well, then he's welcome to pose more IRs, and I think he's already up to round 12, if I'm not mistaken. So that's the response. Ultimately, it's the Commission's call as to whether to proceed with deposing Connie Lau and Jim Robo. But the two sides of the CA and the applicants are taking different positions. So if the strategy is to try to win the consumer advocate over to the side of this deal makes sense for Hawaii, it's going to be beneficial for Hawaii. Pushing back on his desire to put the two CEOs under oath most likely won't be seen as a very accommodating or compelling kind of thing to do from the perspective of the consumer advocate. I'd be interested to hear what Mina thinks about that.
Well, when you read some of the pleadings that have been tossed around in this case, you wonder if anybody's mind is going to be changed. I think a lot of the people in the case have already taken a position. They have an agenda. And like in any major litigation like this, their agenda is not likely to change. Mina, what do you think? Why did the consumer advocate come out so strong? And what does he hope to achieve?
Well, I don't know. All I know is the consumer advocate is a very talented trial lawyer, and he's going to use every single tool at his disposal to get the information that he needs. That's all I'm going to say.
Well, and now you have plenty of time, decades, in the legislature and in energy, and certainly on the PUC. Have you ever seen an evidentiary hearing where you go not only to the CEOs, but you go to the national CEO on the one side, and you go to the holding company CEO on the other side? Ever seen anything like that before, Mina?
Well, not during my term. We definitely didn't have anything as exciting as this. And, probably the only time that you had a major acquisition was with Hawaiian Telecom.
Yeah. 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 That was very exciting then.
Yeah, but again, I don't think it's up to this level because of the number of interveners. And then even the other acquisition was Kauai Electric by the cooperative.
Yes.
And in that one, I believe the interveners were just Department of Defense, County of Kauai, and the Consumer Advocate. They were the only parties in that socket.
So what do you guys think the Consumer Advocate, and for that matter, if we have an evidentiary hearing like this, we'll have 28 other people there to ask questions. It'll really be a melee. But what will they be asking? Will they be going through that list of conditions that the Consumer Advocate wants and asking whether, NextEra or Hawaiian Electric will comply with that list? What kind of questions can we expect?
Well, I'm just speculating here, but I assume with the number of parties in this docket, the number of issues, that the PUC will probably focus down on the issues that they feel need clarification or they feel need to be debated at an evidentiary hearing. So I don't expect them to open up the entire docket to be argued at evidentiary hearings, but, where they feel they need more information and clarification.
When you have an evidentiary hearing in the PUC, I assume the chair of the PUC is the judicial officer or quasi-judicial officer that conducts the hearing and rules on, for example, objections to questions or attempts to require the witness to answer a question on the other side. So this is going to be hard for the chair of the PUC because it'll be contested throughout. A lot of people will be making demands for information, and NextEra will be pushing back.
I think you have the right chair in place at this time because the chair is very familiar with administrative proceedings, and he's a lawyer, and so he's very familiar operating in that kind of climate. I can only speak for myself. When we had evidentiary hearings when I was chair, that was a real weakness for me because I don't have a legal background, and I had to learn the procedures. I even went to judge school. And the main thing I learned in judge school is you're the boss.
Right.
That was the whole class.
That's when you became tough as nails, Mina. I remember.
You're the boss, and you're the it's your courtroom.
Yep.
That's what I learned.
Well, he's going to be Randy Iwasi's going to have his hands full with all these people who want to ask questions, and it could go on and on for months. Marco, how long do you think it's going to go on? And by the way, the show can't go on very much longer. We only have a minute or two left.
Jay, the show must go on.
Thank you.
Surely you've learned that after all this time, I hope. How long is it going to go on? Well, there are two scenarios. One is that the applicants stick it out to the very end, which the chair has noted he expects sometime mid-year 2016, or the applicants, one or both of them, decide before that date that the likelihood of success has reached a point that it doesn't warrant continuing to spend the time, money, effort, resources to continue down that path. And that's I'm not omniscient enough to know what their calculus is, but a reasonable person would conclude that there aren't an infinite number of options out there, and I think it's either stick it through to the end or decide at some point before the end that it ain't going to work, and cut your losses and move on to other things.
Mina, can you close? We only have a minute left. Why don't you give your thoughts about whether you think this deal is going to go all the way down or it's going to break apart before?
Oh, I think it's going all the way down to a decision. And, my concern is it going to be a well thought out decision and analysis on this application, or is it strictly going to be a political decision? I hope for the former.
Okay, well, I'd like to do this again and follow it from time to time. It's the biggest transaction that has ever taken place in Hawaii, and it's the one that casts the longest shadow over our future, not only in terms of energy, but all the things that energy affects in our lives, especially our economy. So we'll be back, won't we? We three, and we'll do this again 2 weeks from now. Mina, Marco, and me, again, here on ThinkTech. Thank you so much, Mina and Marco. Aloha, and we'll talk to you soon.